I've been in radio for 3 years. I've got a Denver Post column. I do teach sometime, but not teaching this semester. I will teach next semester. I'll be teaching at Regis. I was teaching at Colorado Christian University. I'm thinking about the next stage of my life, maybe dog groomer, Shakespeare actress. You think I jest? No, I love to, I just love to try new things. And I came into radio serendipitously, or I should say maybe providentially. I used to be a freelance writer, the interim between heritage and radio and teaching. I was a freelance writer. I had a whole bunch of clients. It was good. Then I ended up having to get multiple surgeries on my arms. I was looking at more surgeries on my hands, and it was kind of like, I got to do something else, right? Well, this deep voice, which I always resented, because I could never sing with the cute little girls in elementary school. Because if I started singing with the sopranos, I sound like a foghorn. It's not good, but the deep voice, as it turns out, is perfect for radio. So radio and teaching, whereas I still do some writing, I at least now can use my voice to teach and to do radio. And so until this wears off, and I have to think of like maybe using my feet for my living, this is what I'll be doing. And it is exciting. Some people might say, well, why radio? I do some television. I just love radio. I always have. I remember I used to be on the far left when I was like 19, 20, 21 years old, and then was hit by lightning, kind of. Ended up becoming a conservative, ultimately then a libertarian. But when I was when I went from liberal to conservative, I started listening to Rush Limbaugh. And I have to admit, even though I don't agree with him a lot of the time, I still love him. And that's the power of voice, right? I also love Terry Gross of NPR, which, like, you can think of two more different human beings in the world, Rush Limbaugh and Terry Gross, but there's something about voice that I find incredibly intriguing. And I'm a little bit like a dog or a cat in that I can't watch the TV for very long before I get bored and start licking my arm. Kidding about the arm licking, but I just can't watch TV for very long. I mean, I watch maybe a couple of hours a week. I read several newspapers. I read several publications. I love to read, and I listen to radio a lot. Everything from public radio to talk radio to religious broadcasting to good old-fashioned rock and roll. I love radio. And I'd been a guest a number of times on other shows, but it never occurred to me to be a host until I started kind of showing up on occasion on John Andrews' Backbone Radio. After that, then Ross Kaminsky had it, and then Matt Dunn and I had Sunday nights to ourselves. And what's interesting to me is that in terms of radio, probably the only two hosts that are at all similar to one another is Ross and I, the two libertarian hosts in the city. Now, some would balk at my libertarian credentials. Sometimes I call myself a conservatarian, which would be sort of the union of both. I'm also super granola-y, like I have free-range chickens. When I'm at home, I basically dress like a homeless person and play around in my little farmlet, gardening and growing things, and being the science nerd that I am. I have field guides. I like look up birds and stuff. So I'm kind of an odd fit in some respects, but in other respects, I feel like I'm being true to myself. I officially became a libertarian the night that Trump became the nominee. I decided that, thank you. There are things that I do like about him, but I just didn't feel that the party was big enough for the both of us. I wasn't comfortable with where the party was going. I say that because my theory of what government is for does not extend to a $1 trillion infrastructure boondoggle. It just doesn't. I am much more libertarian in my bent. And you know what, as you guys know, libertarian is a spectrum, right? So you may have Murray Rothbard over here who's like, let's have, chaos. And it'll be great for all of us. And you know what? He's a fascinating person to read because of that. A kind of anarchist streak that I find kind of appealing. But I would say that I fit more in the Milton Friedman, Rand Paul wing of the libertarian group of us. It's actually a pretty comfortable fit for me. And as Mike mentioned, I'm an LPR graduate. And so even though I spent many years either as a congressional staffer at the Heritage Foundation, my theory on what government is for actually comes from LPR and also the Claremont Institute, where I spent a couple of weeks as a Lincoln Fellow studying under none other than Tom Cranowiter, which I'm sure you've heard from. I got to spend 2 weeks with him and smoke cigars, right? So it was a great couple of weeks, but to my mind, government has one purpose, and that is to protect the life, liberty, and property of the citizens. And that's it. Now, if you're on the kind of one end of the libertarian spectrum, you sort of chafe at anything that goes beyond that. I tend to start chafing when I see the federal government going beyond that. I truly believe that the federal government is here for defense. In my real world, in my ideal world, it doesn't even negotiate trade compacts. Free human beings trade as they will and as they want. But until such things are possible, I guess you could say there's a role for government in trade. Maybe under interstate commerce, you could make room for interstates. But the fact is that the vast majority of powers should be delegated to the states, local government, and to the people themselves. And that is exactly what the framers wanted, because they understand when it's close to the people, it's only then that it's accountable. And of course, people on the left and those big government people on the right will say, oh, no, if there's no national parks, there's never going to be parks. Like parks started in 1915 with Teddy Roosevelt. Right? Parks go back before that, right? We have had wild lands and access to those wild lands long before the federal government got involved. And if you go to any Jeffco Parkland or Boulder Parkland, it's just as gorgeous. They actually do a great job. Colorado parks do a great job. Envision a scenario in which we had lots of great parks, but it was the states and the localities that were administering them. That way, when you have an issue, instead of attempting to dial the Department of the Interior, and I can guarantee you're going to get a recording and no one's going to call you back, instead you would talk to the local administrators of these parks. Or if you have a problem with a game permit, you can go to a local state office. You have accessible government. It's called the subsidiary principle. It means that the government, the unit closest to that responsibility, is the one that should take care of it. So when I think about what government ought to do, I sort of ask myself, is this something that individuals on their own could do? Is this something that communities on their own can do? If anyone's read de Tocqueville, you know that communities, self-organizing individuals have been building stuff since, the 16th century in this country. Whether it's barns, whether it's bowling clubs, whether it is philanthropic endeavors, we have been doing things ourselves. So I ask myself, is this something that individuals or families can take care of? Is this something that local groups can take care of? If not, let's take a look at local government. Is this something the city should take care of? Okay, if it's too big for that, maybe the state. And only then do you look at the federal government. And as far as I'm concerned, defense and border control would be the only two things ideally I would put at that level. Colorado should not have a standing army, right? But the federal government can do that. That said, so if you ask yourself, I want a local park, let's say I want a local dog park. I shouldn't apply to a Department of Interior to get a grant to do that. I should organize with ordinary people to come up with a plan for that. If I want to do something to educate children with disabilities, especially grave disabilities, that may be something more than individuals can cover, and maybe something more than localities can cover. I mean, Denver could probably do it, but a little city in the San Juan Valley, a little town, may have a hard time with a child with multiple needs. So maybe then I would look at the state. Can the state raise funds to educate disabled children, or to offer a safe place for people with grave psychiatric issues? Those kinds of things. And so that's sort of my theory of government. When I look at the two parties, though, you look at Democrats, and Democrats weren't always like this, but now they are full on the party of the left. For them, no amount of government spending is enough. I think they haven't looked down on a government spending program, except for maybe abstinence education. Everything else is fair game, and they want more money. And having had lots of liberal friends, I would say that the majority of them are well-meaning. They see problems, they yearn for justice, they yearn for good things for human beings, but they're going about it in a way that will ultimately hurt those very human beings. I hate to say this, but there are a lot of Republicans that are also into big government. And so while they may say to you, oh, I think we need to decrease these food stamps over here. These folks ought to go to a local food bank. They shouldn't go to the government for food. But oh, don't touch my farm subsidy. No, don't touch my farm subsidy. Or they'll say, well, I want to get highly involved in promoting companies abroad. Well, that's for those companies to do. It's not for you, Republican congressmen, to do that for them. So whether it's individual welfare or farm or corporation welfare, I find that there's a pretty good right-left, Republican, Democrat hand-shaking hand working together on that. And that it's only the libertarians that are pushing back. As I said, there are only two libertarian, to my knowledge, libertarian talk show hosts. Ross is on 6:30 in the mornings. If you haven't heard the show, it's a great show. Ross is a friend of mine. He's a terrific person. And I would say that, and he does a great job. Now, we've got a lot of interesting, more conservative Republican hosts on 710. I'm pleased to say that, well, there's a couple independents, but I'm pleased to say I'm the only libertarian, and frankly, a little bit of a black sheep. I don't really look the part. If you looked at in a lineup, you'd be like, that Peter guy is the black sheep. Or that Craig Silverman guy, who's a former Democrat, he's the black sheep. But I'm probably the black sheep, and I'm actually okay with that. So I learned a couple of things last year. It was my, second or third year in radio. And there were things that I had a hunch about. I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to realize that human beings are human beings, right? And that people do things that are not necessarily in their best interest or in the best interest of the country. And I saw an ugly side to people that I didn't anticipate. And I learned a couple of lessons that now I'm sort of figuring out how I can prudently move forward in a new era of my radio show. And these are some of those observations. For one thing, tribe matters more than truth for most people. I'm not even going to say most people, but for a lot of people. So tribe matters more than truth. And here you can see this in the way the left and the right look at the same situation. So you've got, say, the National Organization for Women. Back when Clinton was having sex in the Oval Office and then lying about it, and it turns out he had sexually harassed an employee, possibly raped another woman. I mean, this guy was a dog. And dishonored the office. And yet you've got the National Organization for Women, the people who are supposed to stand up for us women, supporting Bill Clinton. Why was that? Well, because Bill Clinton supported abortion. They supported abortion, and so they were willing to throw those women under the bus and to come out in favor of Bill Clinton. And I remembered that when I saw people who had once been championing family values, all about, we can't elect people who cheat, we can't elect womanizers, we can't, if you can't keep your pants on in your marriage, if you lie to your wife, you're going to lie to us. I saw all of those people who had criticized Bill Clinton now backing Donald Trump. And I started to realize that tribe mattered more than truth for a lot of people. And in fact, you can see it now. Back when Michelle Obama was First Lady, she did not cover her hair when she was in Saudi Arabia. And some on the right were like, why isn't she covering her hair? Isn't that going to be a failure of diplomacy? And, and then just this week, Melania Trump goes, dressed very appropriately, but not covering her hair. And you get people on the left saying, well, look, she's not covering her hair. I'm like, people, either she should or she shouldn't. But it's not wrong when one person does it and right when another person does it. It's just not. I mean, there needs to be one standard for behavior. When a Republican acts badly or a Democrat acts badly, we have to call it out, and we can't say, well, he's actually an okay guy, even though he did that. But oh no, if the other side does it, I'm going to get really angry, right? We need to have a single standard. And ultimately, that's why I left the party. Actually, I've left the Republican Party twice. The first time is when they held that Medicare Part D vote open for 3 hours. Because Republicans had always been the party of good parliamentary procedure, following the rules. We're going to follow the rules. Oh, but we're not going to follow rules because that guy's 2 hours away. We need to give him time to get here to vote. No, you can't do that. There's either the rules matter or they don't matter. Either we follow the rules or we don't. I'm not saying you follow arbitrary rules, but you either say decorum matters or it doesn't. You either say that lying and cheating are bad or they're not, but you can't say they're bad when this person does them, but not when this person does it. And keep in mind that I had a lot of friends that voted for Donald Trump, and I totally respect their vote. For them, they said, Krista, I don't agree with all this stuff that he's done, but I feel like he is the best way to get us out of this current situation. That I accepted. It's okay to say, I don't like X about this person, but I'm going to support them anyway. What I couldn't get behind was, well, it's not that bad. He doesn't lie. He doesn't make stuff up. No, only the left does that. I just think he's a terrific person, and he's super moral and great, and he's going to do great things for our country. Really? If Trump had done or if Obama had done any of those things, said any of those things, you would have gotten angry. You would have called it out. So if you say that you support somebody, you don't support what they do, but you support what they might be able to do for you. I get that. That's a calculation based on pragmatism. But you can't then get mad when Democrats do the same. You're either going to be a pragmatist or an idealist, but you can't switch hats when it suits you. It's just not right. Either truth matters or tribe matters. It cannot be both. The other thing I learned is what you can and cannot say on radio. So people will say, Krista, you're on radio. You get to give your opinion every day. You can say anything. No, I can't. And I learned that lesson last year, is that people tune into radio to hear what they want to hear. They don't tune into radio to hear both sides. They don't tune, not everyone, but a lot of people don't tune in to hear two sides. They're listening to hear what they want to hear. And if you don't give them what they want to hear, they get mad. And believe it or not, the very same people who are like, hey, I'm all for free speech, were the ones that were going to my GM, general manager, to have me pulled off the air. Really? So apparently you're for free speech when you agree with somebody, but not so much when you disagree. Okay. And that was just a minority of listeners. But it goes to the point of a very human tendency, and that is the need to drink water. Excuse me. Confirmation bias and motivated reasoning. So motivated reasoning is that we tend to look for information that agrees with what we already agree with. When we are, you have to take a mental step to want to look at both sides. Because as human beings, we are hardwired to gather information that we already believe in that supports ourselves and our tribe. You have to deliberately step outside of that to say, I want to see both sides and make my determination. And it's very possible that this motivated reasoning worked out great back when we were tribal entities. And it didn't matter what was right or wrong. What mattered is that we keep this territory and keep these people off. Or we get to capture their stuff and take it. So tribalism is probably at the heart of where motivated reasoning came from. But I would say that now it's sort of interfering with our ability to see objective truth. So stepping outside that and saying, you know what, the tendency is for me to gather things that help me win an argument. Instead, I'm going to first hear both sides. That takes a step. And one of the sort of outcomes of motivated reasoning is confirmation bias. We want to look at only those sources that confirm what we already think. And it's both sides. So you have conservatives watching Fox News, and you have liberals watching MSNBC and CNN. You have conservatives, reading conservative materials, and you've got the left with the New York Times. The only way, I always say that together Fox News and CNN make a complete channel, because I don't want anyone to own my thinking, right? I mean, I like Fox, I like CNN, I look at both of their web pages every day, but if I just look at Fox, their biases now become my biases. It's only by looking at both that I start to see a more complete picture, and I'm actually in a position to make an independent call. The question is, should I make an independent call? There have been times in which I've reasoned through something, come out on the radio with great reasoning, and then gotten a ton of hate mail because I was saying something that conflicted with the majority of other talk show hosts. Now, during the Trump campaign, I made it very clear that I respected everyone's right to vote and make a choice. I was never mean. I was never nasty to people who were nasty to me. I simply defended my right to not vote for that candidate and to vote for a different candidate. But if you think about it this way, 95% of other talk show hosts were singing the praises of Donald Trump. And so here comes this other person who comes on and says, you know what, I have some concerns about his treatment of truth. I have some concerns about some of his big government leanings. Yes, I agree with him on these issues. I have areas of agreement, and frankly, I don't agree with anything about Hillary Clinton, except for the fact that I can do a really good impression. You want to hear it real quick? Yeah. What difference at this point does it make? So, let's see. You do it. I know, it's like, where is she? I had to put on a really tacky pink pantsuit to do that, but what was up with that? It was weird pantsuits. I know, like a jumpsuit. Give me a break. Exactly. But, I don't, and then there's Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders, and then he came out, the revolution is over, right? So, the two candidates that I could actually parody are now out of the scene. But anyway, it's, but, I didn't like anything about her. I think she's corrupt, angry, humorless, and a bad dresser, more importantly, right? And I'm glad that she's not president, but I can say that I'm not entirely glad that the president we have, because there are pitfalls there. When I see Republicans, for example, that would have said to President Obama, I'm sorry, a $1 trillion infrastructure program is out of the question. We're $20 trillion in debt. Those same people are now like, oh, Mr. Trump, I would love a $1 trillion investment in our economy, and when can we start? I'm like, if Hillary Clinton, awful person, would have been an awful president, but those same members of Congress would have fought back. Now they're co-opted, and that's a bit of a problem. So what do you do when you can't say what you want to say? And of course, the Trump issue is not the only one. I yearn in my heart for a peace that is equitable and lasting for both Israelis and Palestinians. That puts me at odds with about 95% of other radio hosts. It just does. And so when people hear that, it causes a thing called cognitive dissonance, right? When you're not in a state of cognitive dissonance, you've got one thought, you're like, all's well with the world. This color is red. Everyone knows it's red, it's red, it's red. This guy says it's red, this guy says it's red, this guy says it's red. And then comes along somebody else and goes, looks like blue to me. Now which is it? Obviously, I've really oversimplified with the colors. But whenever you've got two thoughts that are in disagreement with one another, or a thought and an action, causes discomfort. If you've got a fairly intelligent talk show host saying, hey, Arabs, I've been to the Middle East, and Arabs are, they're terrorists, obviously, but the vast majority of Arabs are decent people who simply want what you and I want. Family, a job, to worship in peace. And the last 5 talk show hosts have said that Arabs are evil and out to get us. What do you believe? And I only exaggerate a tiny bit here. But it puts me apart. And then it makes people uncomfortable. And when they get uncomfortable, they don't want to advertise, they don't want to listen to the program, they email the GM that says, you need to muzzle your errant host. And so what I'm learning is, how do I prudently put forward my ideas, and when should I know to shut up? Because there are sometimes a battle that I don't need to fight. And I just need to say, well, thank you for your thoughts, sir. Have a great day. And not fight it. So prudence, I think I've got bravery in spades, but prudence is something that I'm working on. I do believe in talk radio, though. I do believe in talk radio. I believe that talk radio is important. And I say this as somebody who loves all forms of radio. I listen to Colorado Public Radio because I'm nerdy and I love facts, right? I love interviews with, the orchard owner in Fruita, Colorado, and why he's concerned about the root system of his plants. Like, that kind of stuff makes me happy. It makes most people want to sleep, but I like it, right? I like hearing interviews. I even like to hear stuff that I don't agree with, because I want to know why people believe what they believe, because otherwise it's just a stereotype in my head. So if I want to believe, like, I used to think that, a lot of far lefties were just, wanting to put a totalitarian, thing in place and rule the world. Like it just seemed to make sense to me until I hung out with far lefties when getting my master's degree and realized that as awful as that ideology is, and the fact that the far left ideology has taken the lives of 100 million people through communism, the people that I sat in that class with, my socialist professors, were like me in one way. They yearned for justice. They looked at poverty and it broke their heart. They looked at sick people and they wanted them healed. Just like me. But the ideology, the answer they picked to that question was such a horribly flawed, desperately flawed answer that would ultimately hurt the very people. And I think about it. I watched a friend of mine die, literally die, under the socialized system in England. I visited him twice while he was... I always wanted theme music. This one sounds like something I would approve of. Is that Bob Seger? I think so. Anyway, who doesn't want a little music? I think it is... Wait, who is this? It'll go off in a moment. Heaven knows I've been in your shoes. So, except for now that I lost my thought. Squirrel. Anyway, my friend was dying. And I kid you not, right? Socialized medicine, they've had it since, I think, the 1950s. When I went to visit him in his hospital room 3 years ago, he was sharing a hospital room with 3 other people. 3 other people. When was the last time you went into an American hospital and saw anyone sharing a room anywhere, except for maybe the waiting room? I watched, they denied him. Anyone here had cancer? So you know the shot you have to take sometimes when you're getting chemotherapy? You don't have to do, think this. Because chemo is rough on the body, and very often it'll start killing off your white blood cells. So you get a shot called a Neulasta shot. The Neulasta shot will boost your white blood cells so that you can tolerate the chemo. I know this because my dad had to get the Neulasta shot. My friend emails me 6 months before he dies and says, I have to discontinue chemo, even though it's working, because it's killing me. It's killing off all my white blood cells. And I said, well, why haven't they given you the Neulasta shot? It's sort of like a duh thing. It's what everybody does here. He emails his doctor, right? And the doctor says, oh, we're not allowed to give that shot to anyone but a very small percentage of people. So when you hear of rationing, it's a very real thing. And it's not just somebody in Canada waiting an entire year to get a hip surgery. It's somebody with terminal cancer who can't get the Neulasta shot because it's expensive. And some actuary in the bureaucracy said, I'm sorry, a 50-year-old with this kind of cancer isn't worth it. So don't give him the shot. Right? And he died. He actually had to be on a waiting list for hospice. Like, I went to visit him, and they're like, yeah, we're waiting. We've contacted various hospices in the area, and we're waiting for a bed for hospice to die. Right? So my friends, my liberal friends, when they long for socialized medicine, they long from a place of goodness. I believe that. Now, there are some people who are cynical and nasty and just want power. But your average liberal says, I have a friend who's sick, and I want them better. What they don't understand is that the very thing that they are asking for kills people, right? And I'm not, I know that we're liberal in this audience. They'd be like, yeah, but when I broke my arm skiing in the Alps, they fixed it for $10. Well, yeah, for routine little care, a broken toe, an allergy infection or something, you could probably get decent care in a socialized system. You got a complex hip issue, knee issue. You got money. If you got money, you come to the States, right? Or you buy private health insurance in England. My friend could not afford private health insurance. So he was on the public insurance plan, which meant that he died. Now, could he have died? I mean, I'm intellectually honest. I know he could have died anyway. But I'm pretty sure he would have lived had he been here. So what does radio do to combat that? Radio is that alternative voice. Talk radio, is not only commentary, but it's actually giving stories that don't get aired in the regular news. So let's say there's a pro-life rally with 10,000 people in Denver. Denver Post gives it like one paragraph, like on page 10. at the very bottom of the page. There's a women's march with those pea hats. I'm trying to censor myself. They, like a kitty hat, but not quite. Out there protesting Trump. That not only got front page coverage, but they did a story, I kid you not, above the fold about how women were knitting those hats. Really? Like, there's no other news you can cover. I realize it's a medium-sized city. We don't have a ton of scandal. But you're going to put a knitting story about a liberal group knitting hats for a parade on the front page. Yeah, and you will never get in the paper for that. Right? But talk radio gives voice to that, and that's what makes it beautiful. And that's why I believe in talk radio, because it not only gives a voice, it gives stories that people don't hear in the mainstream press. But there's a dark side to talk radio. Some talk radio show hosts say things that aren't true, or they exaggerate things that aren't true, and they ill-equip listeners to then go and argue points with their liberal friends. Ultimately you end up looking like a buffoon if you learned something on some talk show host that wasn't correct. Then you go into an argument and somebody goes, well, everyone knows that's not true, and they can point it out. You become ill-equipped. And I also think that those tendencies towards tribe over truth, those tendencies of confirmation bias, all of these things are can be magnified by the dark side of talk radio. It's got its place, but it also can be detrimental. And finally, and then I'll take some questions, why I think libertarians will save America. I say this, I had a really great picture sent to me on my Facebook page. It had Kelley and Kafer, apparently, who was sitting incorrectly on the couch. I don't know if you remember this story, right? She's sitting there incorrectly on the couch, and it was like Democrats were going, she's sitting wrong on the couch. And then you see the picture below that, and it had Democrats that were sitting during portions of the State of the Union. And Democrats were like, they're not standing up like they're supposed to. And then the bottom part of the picture said, libertarians. Guys, we're $20 trillion in debt, right? It seems to me that in this day of, did you see that video clip that Melania slapped Trump's hand away? Who gives a damn? Who cares? Yeah, it's kind of funny. But why is it the top story on CNN? Like, you didn't have anything else. There's a bombing in Manchester. Or maybe it wasn't a bomb, it could have been a technical, something killed 19 people. Like, bombing. That could have been the top story. Why was it this video? Or you think about Pence, he accidentally knocked a kid when he was on a speech stump. And so the kid chased after him and asked for an apology. I kid you not. That's like the 7th story down on CNN. Really? That's a news story? Surely there is something else out there you could have reported on. And I could see equally treatment to Fox News, where they've highlighted something stupid. Meanwhile, as a libertarian, I'm like, guys, we're $20 trillion in debt. I'm sorry that the little boy got his feelings hurt. And I'm sorry that Trump and Melania are having a bad day. But we need to focus on what matters. And we need to have consistent standards that rise above tribe. And we need to start thinking about what government is really for, that it's not to make people better people or to fix everyone's problems. It's simply to protect the life, liberty, and property of the people so that the people can do those things for themselves. And with that, I'd like to take some questions. But I'm going to take